Hey guys, going to talk about some basics in Path of Exile 2 real quick. First up, we got settings. Number one setting I would talk to you about is going to your gameplay, your interface, and finding the thing that says show life and mana skills. Turn that on. It's just nice to know how much life you have, and I like that setting. Also, the Z button will show all loot on the ground all the time. If you can't see loot on the ground, press Z, and that might be the problem. All right. Next up, we got the stash. So let's talk about the stash real quick. I have some currency tabs. It's real nice for organization. If you don't have at least one premium stash tab, I recommend that you get it. That's how you can do things like trade. The guild stash, again, the tabs are up top. We have 2 guild tabs right now, so we got a lot of stuff you guys can look over. If it's in the tab, it means it's free for all. We have 2 guys that use crossbows, so nobody's really going to be using these bows except for one person. So if you want to use the items, use them. Otherwise, throw them in the garbage. I don't give a shit. You don't have to worry about putting it back when you're done with it. Whatever. Gear comes. We get a lot of gear. All right. Next up, vendors. Now vendors are really powerful.
Take your time.
Make sure that each town. This is the Act 3 town. Each town has 2 vendors. One's going to sell. Well, they have more than that, but they have 2 important vendors. One's going to sell stuff like potions and caster items, as well as your ID scrolls. She also sells amulets and rings. Another one's going to sell your martial weapons, as they're referred to. Your armor and your boots and your gloves and stuff like that. What I do is I go through, and if it's blue, I hover over it. If it's rare, I'll buy it. For example, if I was a monk, I look at this quarterstaff and I'm like, dang, that's actually pretty good. I wish I could buy that for a monk right now, but it's 37,000 gold. But I just had 150,000. I spent a bunch on gambling, and I'm not a monk. So that's a pretty good weapon, though. You can see how much power you can get from the vendors. All right, next up, salvage. Okay, if you got items, every town has a salvage bench in it. Reforging bench as well. I haven't quite figured out what that is yet, so I don't know. I don't know how it works. Still working on it. But if you have weapons and stuff like that have the sockets in it, or items that have superior quality, like this guy does here, instead of vendoring it, take it to the salvage bench, because you can get shards that you can put sockets in your gear later on that you want to use. All right, next up, gambling. There's a gambler in every town. If you're struggling to kill stuff, gamble that weapon type that you need. That's on the first tab. If you're rich, like I was last night, you can try gambling rings and amulets and things like that. I lost. All right, next up, alt press. Okay, if you hover it over an item and you're reading about it and you would like, it brings up some questions, that's great. That means that you're thinking about, what does this all mean? If you hold alt when you're clicking over it, it brings up even more information. We'll talk about the prefixes and the tiers here shortly. The main thing I want to show you right now is that when you have these dots under it, it means you can hover over it and it'll give you more information about that mechanic. You can click on it and you see how the box changes to a better box. If you see more in there that you want to click, and you can see that you can just keep on reading information. Seems like a lot, it is, but it starts to become redundant, and then as you play on, you'll start to see the connections and how things work. Again, you can even do this on the passive tree. If you hover over, and what does melee mean? Well, melee attacks are those that directly hit with a melee strike or slam. So if I'm using a crossbow, probably not a good idea to pick this. It's not going to help my damage because that's a ranged attack. All right. Next up, we've got gear. All right. Let's talk about tier levels real quick. When I'm holding alt over an item, you'll see on the left here, and it's barely visible, and I hope they kind of add a little more emphasis to this, because Barton and I have been playing this game for a while, and looking at that, we didn't even notice it until forever. But Items can have prefixes and suffixes. Uniques are an exception to this rule, and we'll talk about uniques later. Rare items can have up to 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. Your prefixes are generally your damage suffix, how you get the damage, and then how you get things like life and higher defenses. Your suffixes are generally like supplementary things. For example, increasing your chance to crit or deal critical damage, your attack speed on weapons, and then things like gaining life per hit or plus gem levels. On your body armors, your suffixes will be where you get your resistances, and then some other tertiary things, regeneration, movement speed, primary stat, which is very important for some classes, things like that. You'll just notice the suffixes are, you'll notice that the top ones, the prefixes, are the more interesting ones, but the suffixes are also very powerful. All right, moving on to that, from that is using currency. All right, one way to really easily increase your power level is when you find white items. This is an advanced crumbling mall. Advanced happens when you are in the second third of the game. So you beat the campaign and then you go through the campaign again. It's more difficult, but the items that drop become advanced. After you beat the campaign the second time, you go into the third end game, which is maps, which are, they have different bosses. It's a whole different area. You unlock a whole new passive tree. It's pretty cool. But that's where you get experts. So there's 3 tiers of items. So the items you're getting now are good for where you're at now, but they're not going to be end-game items. So using currency on them is encouraged, but just keep in mind that as you can continue to progress through the game, you're going to find more items that you want to use currency on. So using that currency, and as it becomes more rare, is more of a risk. However, that's the way the game is designed to be played. You're gambling every time. Sometimes you hit, like the small. I hit pretty well on it. 390 maximum damage is pretty insane. But I spent a lot of currency on weapons. So use them, but just don't use too many. Don't empty yourself all the time. If you have very few of a certain currency, there's a reason for that. You'll get exalted orbs. Those are very rare. You can use them to add a prefix or suffix to a rare item. So if you find a really good rare item and you want to make it even better, you can sometimes you throw it on there. It's a gamble. You might hit well, you might not. That's the game. Just keep on going. You'll get more exalted orbs. You'll get better items. Keep on grinding. All right. So let's say we pick up a white item that's a good weapon for our class. So what you're going to do first is use an orb of transmutation. That's a normal item into a magic item. Normal is white, magic is blue, rare is yellow, unique is orange. All right, so boom, we throw it on there. I actually hit really well on that. I hit 27 to 48. This is going to be a great example of a crafting video. So I hit 27 to 48 physical damage. You can see it's a tier 6 roll. The higher the tier, the better. At the very end game, you'll see tier 10 and tier 11 items. Right now, I'm about in the middle of the game, so tier 6 is pretty good. All right, so now the next up, and you'll see they're in kind of order, is the Orb of Augmentation. So as I said, magic items can have 2 affixes, is what they're called. 1 prefix and 1 suffix. So when I used it to turn it magic, it gave me a prefix, so now I need to add a suffix. So I hit Alt, and I hit pretty well again. I got 12% increased attack speed. That's pretty great. I'm happy about that. But it's a magic item, and I can't augment it anymore. I can't add any more stats because it's magic and it can only have 2. Can't transmutation it, can't augment it. So the next step is a Regal Orb. A Regal Orb will turn a magic item into a rare item, adding 1 modifier. So I'm going to try and Regal this and see what I hit. And now I hit a bummer. I hit adds 3 to 5 cold damage. Pretty garbage compared to the roll that I got for that. So that's disappointing, and I'm sad about it. Would I expend an Exalted Orb on this? Yes, because I could still hit pretty well. There's another spot for a prefix, so I could hit, as example, increased physical damage like I have on my other maul here. Maybe I get lucky. Or I could just hit 1 to 5 lightning damage. It's a gamble. That's the game. Next up is a Chaos Orb. So I can remove a random modifier from this, and then I can add another one. I only have one of these, but for the purpose of the video, I'm going to say fuck it and see what happens. I'm hoping to remove 3 to 5 cool damage, and I did not. I removed the really good physical damage roll. So that's the game, gambling. This thing is now trash. It's bricked. See you later. That's an example of crafting. Like I said, it's a gamble. Sometimes it works. Other things to talk about are Orbs of Alchemy. That turns an item that's white into a rare item right off the bat. So for the purpose of this video, we'll find something that we have that's white. I don't even know if the vendor's going to have anything that's white for me.
On that one. Watch your step.
Well, here's some boots. Maybe one of you guys will get lucky. All right. I take the Orb of Alchemy. And bam, it turns into a rare item. And it hit pretty well. 95 life. Pretty good armor and evasion. I'll throw it in the guild stash for one of you guys once you get up to around using it. Doesn't have movement speed on it. We'll talk about movement speed at defenses, but boots, you need to have movement speed. All right, that's currency. Uniques. Let's talk about uniques real quick. So I have my stash. I have a lot of tabs. I've been playing this game for 10 years, so I've spent some money on it, so I have some cool stuff. But what are uniques? Uniques are these items that you probably don't have any of or very few of. They do special things. They do things outside of your normal rare items. Rare items can have their own special properties, though, as well. But uniques are generally, they always roll the same. They do have, like this wand, the spell damage rolled 100%. It can roll 80 to 100, and I'm pressing Alt. So it actually rolled really well on that. But they can have some things that are different there, but every unique will have the same mods. They just roll a little bit different. And they can be very powerful. They can do things that no other item or spell or gem in the game can do. But they're not always the best. Your rare items are going to be your best. These are just very build-defining items, generally speaking. If you're specifically going a certain route, they can help. Or a lot of times they're just really good if you want to make a new character and you throw on some stuff just to give yourself a little bit of an advantage, then great. Like I could throw this on a spellcaster at level 1 and get some pretty good mods just for faster leveling. The game feels very slow now. I understand to some, and just know that you'll get faster as you understand the game more and as you progress. Movement speed on boots helps. Movement speed on boots helps. All right, next up, we're already at 13 minutes. I apologize for this being long. Hopefully you can see the list of stuff we're going to talk about here, and if you're interested in it, you can go on to that. I'll start highlighting things that we've done. So, weapon importance. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about. Your weapon, unless you are a spellcaster, your weapon is your primary source of increasing your damage. As I stated earlier, if you are struggling to kill things, it's probably not your build. It's probably just you haven't invested enough into your weapons. When upgrade weapons drop and they're white, use the transmutation and the augmentation on it. You never know what you can hit. That's what they're there for. Constantly be pressing. Gambling weapons for your class if you have the money to do so. Focus on your weapon. If you're a spellcaster, your weapon is also tied into it because of that free spell it gives you based on the staff or whatever you're using. But gem levels are going to be even or very important for you as well. Gem levels for spellcasters, weapons for attackers, melee or ranged. Okay, more versus increased. This is the next way we're going to talk about how you increase your damage. On your tree, your spell tree or your passive tree, you'll probably have nodes similar to these, where it says 15% increased melee damage. Increased is an additive modifier. So if I do 10 damage and then I get this, I'm now doing 11.2 damage. If I get this, I'm not increasing that 11.2, I'm increasing that original 10 damage. But what I'll do is I'll add 12% to this and 12% to this, and that's 2.4, so now my 10% is 12.4. And it goes on. Increased is good. Don't shy away from it. But the better one, and I'm going to open my skill tree right now, and I apologize for not talking about it yet. The better one is more, right here. Skills do more damage. More is a multiplicative modifier. And if you don't understand the difference between additive and multiplicative, it's not a big deal. Just understand that if you have an opportunity to get something that says more damage, do it. Pay attention though, because sometimes it's not just always going to be listed, and something like this isn't actually going to reflect on my DPS. Supported skills consume enemy fully broken armor to deal 50% more damage. I have to make sure that the enemy's armor is fully broken to get the advantage of this. And that leads into talking about DPS. Sometimes you'll have things that increase your damage, but it won't show on there because it's not an all-the-time thing. This right now is looking at exactly the way my character is set up. When they're talking about consuming fully broken armor, I have to have an enemy that has broken armor, and then I have to hit them. And that's not going to be factored into this because it doesn't show that. So just know that your DPS is a good metric for how much damage your character is doing, but you have to understand that there's other factors that play into that damage that will increase your damage significantly. And one of those factors is more modifiers. If you can conduct a game action that unlocks a more damage ability, do it, and do it as much as you can and focus on it. Everything, for your gems, a lot of them have those more multiplier on it, so you'll want to look for that on your gems. Well, how do you do that? Let's talk about your support gems. I have a support tab, it's really nice here, but I'm going to right click this to use it, and then I'm going to go to Mace Strike, and I'm going to open up, and I'm going to unclick this show recommended gems. I'm going to show you that you can do this, but as a new players, leave this on. But I'm just doing this for the purposes of showing you that you can search for certain ability or certain keywords when you're thinking about where to progress your character. And as you see, I typed in more down here, and this shows all the support gems that I can make that have more in the phrase. So for example, hits with supported kills called 50% more stun buildup. You could, say freeze buildup, electrocution buildup, ignite damage, amplification, things like that. All these are similar to stun, but there's more. There's the potential, biting frost. These all have more and so just know that increased is good, more is better. The flip side of that is less, or decreased and less. So decreased is an additive thing, so it's not that bad. A less is multiplicative. It'll automatically take it off to the very end of all calculations. You're definitely getting bumped down for 30% of your damage. An example of that is my abilities like Hammer of the Gods. While dual wielding, both weapons hit with 30% less damage. So because I'm dual wielding two weapons, I deal 30% less damage. It sounds bad, but it's actually really good because I'm hitting with both of them at the same time. So 390 plus 286 is about 650 damage, 700 damage, and then 30% less of that. Where if I was only hitting one, the best I could do was 390. All right, I'm kind of getting into the weeds there. I apologize. Next up is combos. So as I alluded to earlier, with this hammer, this support here, exploit weakness, fully broken armor, I deal 50% more damage. These things are riddled throughout the game, and this is very different than PoE 1, but this is kind of the way PoE 2 is designed, is that you're using several abilities to trigger various ailments or setups on the enemies. So I, for example, am breaking their armor to deal more physical damage to them, and then consuming that broken armor to deal even more damage. And so there's a lot. I haven't played any of the other classes, but the game will kind of lead you into those combos. FedEx is here. If you pay attention. And your skill tree is kind of leads you that way as well. As I showed you earlier, you can search in your gems. Well, you can search on your skill tree. So breaking armor is important to my build. So if I type in break, you'll see it highlights, and you can zoom in and out on here. It highlights a lot of the skills that talk about breaking armor. And I can focus my tree and head that direction to unlock some of those break armor nodes. Okay? So being able to search on the tree is very, very important. And the combos are also very important. One last thing is attack speed. Attack speed is another great way to increase your DPS. It does have diminishing returns. So you want to get some of it, but you don't want to put a bunch of effort into it. You can later on in very specific builds for specific reasons, but for purposes of your first playthrough and leveling through the campaign, get a little attack speed. If you're a caster, get some cast speed. It will definitely help your damage. The only real sources of it I have is right here, and then the rest comes from gear and rolls on your weapons and things like that. Speaking of that, when it says 6% increased skill speed, or cast speed or attack speed, they all essentially mean the same thing. That is a base of your weapon. So you see my attacks per second are 1.05. So basically I can attack once per second with that thing. This is 1.2. When you're dual wielding, well, I won't talk about dual wielding because none of you guys are playing dual wielding things, but just understand, for purposes, let's just say that I just have this one weapon equipped. This is increasing that speed. Okay? So 4 plus 4 plus 6 is 14%. So I would just take this 1.05. I got a calculator here. 1.05. Multiply that by 1.16 to represent the 16%. And now I can attack 1.2 times per second is what that means. So over the course of 4 seconds, I can attack 5 times, because 1.2 times 4. Where's the times 4? Oh, not quite. Anyways, that's what that means. Now your gems might have further restrictions on it. For example, this Hammer of the Gods says my attack speed is 50% of the base. So that, where'd that calculator go? That 1.2 seconds attack is cut in half, so it's 0.6. So it basically takes me 2 seconds to get this attack off, if that makes any sense. As well as like your critical strike chance. If you're a crit character, you'll see it says crit hit chance is 5%. Everything is based off that. So if you get plus critical strike chance of 3%, it's going from 5 to 8. You can obviously see that in your gem skill tabs. If you hit this, and then you'll notice sometimes there's tabs up here that can explain what further things do. Because, for example, this skill hits, and then it releases a shockwave, so it has 2 parts to it. So you can see what both things are. You'll get a lot of stats on here. My character I have a specific keystone, and we'll talk about keystones in a little bit, that says I can't crit, so you won't see that. But it'll tell you how much physical damage I do, my attacks per second. You'll see it's 0.76. So that's that. This one also 60% base. So my guy attacks very slowly but hits hard. Yours probably hits fast and not as hard. Makes up for it. All right, so gems. Gems are the number one way you're going to do damage. You should, as you progress through the game, actually end up needing to use all these slots. The only one I don't really use right now is Seismic Totem, but all these other gems I have on my tree because they do various things to increase my damage in a fight, as I was talking about those combos. Play around with gems, use the recommended ones, level up your gems as much as you can. You'll get plenty of skill gems. Sometimes I don't even pick them up anymore, but you'll get plenty of skill gems, so just use them freely. Use your support gems freely. Unless, you can only use one type of a support gem in your whole thing, unless you're a Gemling Legionnaire. If you're the Marauder or whatever the fucking Legionnaire or whatever, Mercenary, whatever that fucking character is, one of your ascendancies, and your ascendancies are another further customization, another small tree that you get, very powerful. You unlock it around midway through Act 2. Then you can use 2 of support gems. So feel free to craft them. If you're not going to use them, put them in your stash. Support gems you can't level up, and these gems you get plenty of, so just level up as you can. You'll see that I already have all my gems that I'm using at level 14. I could use it on a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to use, but it's just, I'll just hang on to them. I put some in the guild stash. Level 13 is the most powerful gem of when you unlock, for at least my class. So if you, I think you need level 51 or 52 for it. So I put a couple of these in there so you could try it out as soon as possible, because you probably won't find one until a little bit higher. So that's something to look forward to. All right. Talked about supports. Oh, leveling and your mana cost. So one thing that you have to balance is your mana, unless there's other things. Just know that everything in this game has some kind of way to get around it, but you can't get around everything. You have to pick what you want to get around and what you don't. And that will make more sense as you look at the skill tree and develop a more understanding of the game. But you have to balance mana costs. So my mana costs are fairly large. This costs 155 mana and 10 life because I have a little bit of my mana costs moved over into life. But 155, which means I can only cast it once, and then I have to wait for some mana regen. Part of that is because like on this weapon here, I have +4 to level of all melee skills. So that the higher your gem levels, and you see they're 18, they're 14 base, and I got that +4, the more mana cost, as well as your support gems will also sometimes increase the cost of mana for your things. So my break armor cost 40 mana, you'll see right there. I take out this, and now it costs 40 mana still. I take this out, and it costs 40 mana still. And I take this out, and it costs 40 mana still. So none of these gems increase the cost, but some of them do, so just be cognizant of that. All right, what else do we have to talk about? Oh, Spirit. So as you progress through the game, there's some quests that are going to give you a resource called Spirit, and Spirit is for things like auras. So you'll see I have this Berserk. It's a buff. Its reservation is 30 Spirit, and it gives me some abilities. You'll have them as well. You'll probably have Heralds are a popular one that all classes get, and then you'll get some defensive ones. And then you can put supports in those that have additional reservation of more Spirit, and they can give you even further abilities. That's why you'll end up using a lot of your stuff, is because you're going to want to run some of these auras or heralds to increase your damage or your defense. You can get Spirit on gear, plus 37 to Spirit there, and you'll see my amulet has plus 49 to Spirit. So you can run more powerful auras and put more supports in them. You'll get a baseline of 100 spirit, so if you're factoring that in, you'll see that I have 186 unlocked, and I've used 150 of it. So obviously, I need that additional spirit for the gear. So the spirit's pretty good if you can get it in your build, and you will. All right, so defense. We're talking about defense now. Defense is split into 3 categories when you're talking about gear. You have armor, which is what all my things have. And armor provides physical resistance. You can see it on your tab. If you are a spellcaster, you're probably going to have real low armor because armor is strength requirement, and spellcasters are up here on the tree, and that's a lot of intelligence-based nodes. Obviously, the small nodes that you can pick any kind of attribute. If you're a hybrid class here, like this guy, he's in between the strength area and the dexterity area, so you're going to want a good mix of strength and dexterity. So those other 2 nodes or kinds of defenses are armor or evasion and energy shield. Evasion makes it so characters are less likely to hit you with attacks, but it doesn't really help against spells, enemy spells. And then energy shield is very similar to life in that when you get damaged, it takes from your energy shield before it takes from your life, except for some instances. So if you hover over energy shield and you see that chaos damage removes twice as much energy shield, and damage from bleeding and poison bypasses energy shield. So those things would immediately kill you, or they would take damage from your life before your energy shield. An energy shield will be represented down here. I don't have any because I'm a Unga Bunga, but it is another form of defense. Each of those are tied in with a specific stat. So armor's tied in with strength, dexterity is tied in with evasion, and intelligence is tied in with energy shield. All right. Life is a very important part of your game, as you have seen. So on your gear, prioritize getting life if you can. You see that my chest here has 130 life. My helmet has 87 life. I also have strength, which on a lot of pieces of gear, which increases life passively. My ring has 72 life. And then strength, as you'll see, grants +2 life for each strength. I have 380 strength, so that's 760 flat life. There are a few ways to get percentage increased life. I would recommend you go on the tree and type in life, and then you can see the things that highlight. Life regen, that's handy for me because it kind of takes some of the stress off of my flask. But there's life regeneration stuff there, and life leech, and stuff like that. So it's hard to find ways to increase your life on the tree. I wouldn't rely on it, but I would look at ways to increase your regeneration or your leech if you have those available to you. And then, of course, putting life on your gear is important. As well as there's runes that can increase your life by percentage. If we go to our thing, you can search in here again, type in life. You'll see armor +25 life, armor regenerate, and armor increase recovery of life from your flask and your mana recovery from your flask. So those can go in your armor and your boots and all that stuff. They take Artificer Stone. I don't have any right now because I just used a bunch to increase or get armor and all this stuff. But definitely be socketing those runes. Resistances, again, I have resistance runes in my chest. So you'll want to try and keep these above 0 with the eventual plan of getting them to 75. And even further from that, you can get 75 as the max, but there are ways to increase that. And those are generally fairly powerful increases to your defenses. Armor, again, is one of the only ways to mitigate physical damage. Everybody can get resistances. Chaos is a more difficult one to get. But armor is a little bit more difficult to get at. So it's a little bit of the advantage of my class, where I have to get in close a lot. You don't have the range to help keep me alive. Oh, look at that, movement speed. Movement speed on defense. Movement speed is very important. Not only does it expedite your process through the game, but there's a lot of stuff you have to dodge roll, or you have to move quickly. Movement speed is very, very important. Your boots need to have movement speed on it. If they don't, that's one of your, after your weapon, if your weapon's lacking, movement speed on boots is next. You'll want to start with 10%, move up to 15, then 20 later on after you beat the campaign the first time. All right, passive tree. We're getting long in this video, so I'm going to kind of cruise over this a little bit, but your passive tree, I've already shown you that you can search it, and ways to look at increase your damage, increase your survivability. But how do you do that? Well, I would recommend that you alternate between clusters. You'll notice that most things in the game have clusters. This is a cluster here, this is a little cluster here, there's a little cluster here, and they either usually are offensive or defensive clusters. And so a good best practice is if you fill out a node that is focused towards defense, one time, make your next one offense. So you can just kind of progress through the tree that way. There's lots of ways to go. The main highways are a good, safe bet, and then just building off of those and just looking at what it is. Say, am I interested in war cries? Not really. I'm not going to put any points in that. Am I interested in increasing my strength as much as I can? Yes. So I'll take that. Nice thing about strength for me is it both my offense and my defense, so I'm getting a little double dip in there, which is nice. Keystone passives, I think, and jewel slots were the next two things I was going to talk about. So as you're coming down, you'll come across these jewel slots. They're quite powerful if you find good jewels. If you don't, they're kind of a wasted slot. If you have a jewel, and you have one of these unlocked, throw it in there. It can't hurt. It's not going to do anything bad to you. But if you find a good one, like this one isn't too bad, increases my life leech and makes my empowered attacks do more damage, great. Keystone passives. So small passives are these little guys here. Large passives are these bigger ones, and then keystone are the really big ones. And the keystone passives are very, very, very powerful. They are similar to uniques in that they can do things and change the rules of the game very specifically, but oftentimes they do have a drawback attached to it. And so if you're going to take a keystone passive, figure out ways that you can mitigate or ignore the downside, and then capitalize on the plus side. So for example, down here we have iron reflexes. It converts all your evasion rating to armor. So what that would mean is, the mercenary or legionnaire, whatever the fuck his name is a hybrid class where a lot of your armors are designed around evasion and armor. So instead of having a mix of the two, you would focus entirely on armor. Is that good? Well, it depends. Here's a thing where if you have a shield on, your chance to block is doubled. So you can basically reach the max block and block every attack that comes in, but you still take 50% of damage. So it's just a straight up 50% damage reduction against enemies. Seems pretty good, is it? So it's kind of interesting. Those keystone passives, they make you kind of lean into a certain aspect of the game, and there is a lot of them. The tree is massive. You can go anywhere you want on this tree. You can make a warrior that casts spells if you really want to. You can make a dexterity character that uses two-handed maces. There's no restrictions on what your class can do. It's just, can you get the passives to support it? If I'm a witch or a sorceress or whatever, and I'm starting up here, and I want to use two-handed maces, but the buffs to two-handed maces are all the way down here. I have to go really far on the tree to try to get there. Is it worth it? Sometimes it is, but that's way more advanced. Interesting thing to look at, just if you're wondering what the power of Keystone passives are, is your maximum life becomes 1, but you're immune to chaos damage. So how do you build around that? How do you, if bleeding and poison makes your, bypasses energy shield, what does that mean? Just interesting stuff to think about. How do you work? How do you get around those things to turn them into powerful stuff? All right. Last thing I want to show you is trade. Here is trade. Well, there's two modes of trade. Let's talk about in-game first. The gambler is also a place where you can do currency exchange. So, pretty simple. I have a regal orb, but I want an exalted orb. So, if I want 1, I'll change it to 1. If I want 1 exalted orb, it's going to cost me 8 regal orbs. If I had the money to do that, and I wanted to do that, that's expensive, but whatever, I'd hit place order, and then my exalted orb will come down here. Again, trade is very advanced. It's not something I would just recommend anybody jump into and use your currency to try and increase your power. Right off the bat, just do the gambling. The campaign's designed to lead you through that, so as long as you're not a complete moron, use your currency to try and get better weapons like I did. But later on, if you're interested in trading for items, this is the trade site. It's the official Path of Exile trade site. It's on the Riding Gear Games website, pathofexile.com/trade2 will take you right there. You can Yahoo it, whatever you want. You'll have to log into your account. But this is how you can do stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I want to search for a crossbow. So you can type in here, and it'll pull up crossbows. And then it'll even look at the unique ones down here. Or you can just type in the item category of crossbow. And that's all I'm going to look at. I just want to see crossbows. So I'm going to hit search, and it's going to pull up 10,000 crossbows that people have for trade. Now in here, you see how there's a little bit of a highlight, and if you can't, I apologize, but I'm going to just click on physical damage, and it's now going to organize it from highest to lowest. So here's a fantastic crossbow, 623 maximum damage. The price is 2,000 exalted orbs. I think I found about 16 exalted orbs so far. But this is the kind of people that play this game. So just so you know, and if you want to get things a little more specific and you want, let's say, a pair of boots with movement speed, you can type in boots in the item category, and you go over to the stats, and you type in movement, and you'll see a bunch of modifiers come up for movement speed. The game is there's very interesting modifiers all throughout the game that work in very different ways, and you can search through all of them. Your more obvious ones are just going to be at the top. So we'll just look for boots with percentage increased movement speed. And let's do that same thing and organize. So 35% is the most. 5 exalted orbs have to be level 70. All right, I feel a little uncomfortable with that, so I probably need to reel my expectations in. So let's just look at some with 15% movement speed, and the level requirement a max of 15. Is there any out there? Oh, perfect. We'll just click that again. 5 orbs of augmentation. Well, I can afford that, so I'll go ahead and buy that. You can organize it by price, and what you do is you just click Direct Whisper. Boom, and look at that. In game, it just sent a message right to that guy that says, hey, I want to buy this. If they feel like selling it, this guy is probably not interested in stopping what he's doing for one transmute. He probably listed that for trade several days ago. I think he listed it 8 hours ago. So if he was interested, he would send me a party invite. I would hit accept, and then you can click to travel to their hideout if they have a hideout unlocked. That happens after the campaign's done, or they'll teleport to you. You can type into there, into party, or whisper them again. If they don't whisper back or invite you, well, move on to the next one and hit direct whisper again. It's pretty simple. Generally, the cheaper the item, the less likely somebody is to respond, just because it might not be worth their time. I don't know why they have it listed then, but that's how trade works. If you guys have any other stuff you want to talk about, we can. Ascendancies, that's coming up for everybody, so just know I didn't do it until I over-leveled it by about 10 levels. It's not, you don't have to do it right away. It's not part of the campaign, but you do want to do it eventually. I do recommend over-leveling it to do it. Be in the early 30s before you try the first one, because otherwise it's very unforgiving, especially for new players. Hope you guys learned something. I kind of liked making the video. Again, if you have other questions, give me a shout. All right, laters.